In this video, we are answering your questions. It's another OG 55 Q&A coming up right now. Welcome aboard to another OG 55 Q&A. I brought my brothers with me today, Mr. Family Man, Dr. Dre down below. We are going to go over some of your questions today. We're going to break them down, talk about them. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my fantastic panel right over here. Mr. Family Man 23 with an amazing shirt. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. If you want to interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, you'll find me here on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with a lot of sweet, juicy, but yet sticky Disney news and info. And remember, folks, with my shirt, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Pay attention, it's showtime.
There you go.
Exactly. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Exactly. And down below, I got the Dr. Dre, Vash Sky, host of the Freshly Squeezed show here on OG 55. Dr. Dre, welcome back, brother. If you can let everyone home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, best place to find me is going to be at Vash Sky right down there. Just go ahead and type that in. Should pop up in the Twitters right there for all the, as Christine Waysigns would say, for all the robust discussion, right? You can find me right there. And if you want to see me, Walt's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. There we go. Keep it simple today.
There we go. All right, fellas, let's dive in. We got a lot of great questions this time around. We're going to jump right in and get going. First question comes from M. Dudley. And M. Dudley is asking, I know you guys think this is already a tired topic, but I saw about a dozen quote unquote unfavorable mix shirts in the Disney Resort parks on Saturday. What's your take on the effectiveness of in-park consumer protest Diz operations related? Has there been a preceding event that you can recall? And if so, what was the result of that protest? If this story continues, will Bobby C have the guts to explain and apologize for the report-based comment on stage at D23? George, I'll start with you. Will Bobby C have the guts to apologize for calling Magic Key holders unfavorable? What do you think the impact of the T-shirt protest at the parks is going to be? What overall thoughts?
Me personally, and I've mentioned this time and time before with the D23 Expo, they're going to lean more towards not even having that kind of discussion at that type of place. You know, I think any chance to even get a crowd routed up by whatever your take is, whether you agree with it or you don't.
But
it's
really,
not the time.
Oh, sorry. I do apologize. That was me, George. I do apologize.
You're good. It's not the time or place to have that kind of conversation. And I may be in the minority here. I truly don't really feel Chapek really has anything to apologize for. There's really nothing that you could actually, it had to come out in some sort of way to explain the reason why they are going through these decisions with the Magic Keys and the annual pass holders. Even though you may not want to think about it or agree with it or what have you, it's the truth. And there's really no way around it. And me personally, they're worried about saying, quote unquote, unfavorable, type of mix or attendance or what have you. I think that was the decent way to mention it, because there's a lot of other ways that you could mention it. Not going to say anything. Pass holes, just saying. But
well, that moniker does exist for a reason.
And George, I think you hit the nail on the head. I also don't think Chapek has anything to apologize for. I mean, look, number one, Dudley's asking, do you think that like the in-park protests is going to have an impact? Absolutely not.
Absolutely
not. Look, the fact that you're in the park, you've already given the approval to JPEG and company for what they're doing. Okay. So if you're going to pay for your ticket, you're going to pay for your Magic Key, you're going to renew your Magic Key, you're going to go in and buy the popcorn bucket and buy the merch. You've already
That's all they care about. That's it. That's all they care about.
That's it. That's all they care about. You've already endorsed them. They don't care about what t-shirt you're wearing. I see 1 million t-shirts around the park. Oh, most expensive vacation ever. Does Disney lower the prices because, oh my God, we saw 7 shirts saying it's the most expensive vacation ever? No, of course not. They don't care about your t-shirt. They do not care. They care about what you spend your money on. And Magic Key holders have shown over and over and over again that they will line up and renew and spend the money regardless of how much they complain on social media. But Dre, what are your thoughts on the in-park protest and Bobby C having to apologize on
in-park protests almost never work. I mean, the only tangential ancillary example of this ever amounting to anything at all was over the Florida bill and so forth that we saw. But even that backtrack, according to some people, might have been strategic, right? So it's like, I mean, one of the most famous examples of an in-park protest was over the closing of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Walt Disney World. That was huge. You know, it got a lot of press coverage and so forth. T-shirts were made and all this kind of stuff. And did we talk about Mr. Toad's at Walt Disney World anymore? Okay, so that just tells you how effective that was.
How did that end up?
They're not. I mean, the most effective way, especially with this specific executive team, the most effective way is going to be with your wallet. Absolutely, 100%. I believe we have a question later on pertaining to Walt and so forth, right, for Enchantment. That was a kind of consumer feedback, necessarily amounting to a loss in revenue type thing that happened there. Right. I think a lot of people felt a little bit unsatisfied with the 50th, and I believe spending as a result reflected that. So that's how you get change there. That's how you get movement, is honestly voting for with your wallet. And if annual pass holders or Magic Key holders are going to just line up to get doled out what they get doled out, again, what's that really telling them? It's telling them that you're accepting their behavior, that their behavior is acceptable to you. That's just the bottom line. And the idea that this would be addressed at D23 Expo, absolutely not.
Never. Not in a million years. And like we said, like when you gave Disney your money to enter that park, you've given the endorsement. You've already the stamp of approval. And whatever shirt you wear, giving it to Bob Chapek or this, that, or the other, is really irrelevant. What the protest should have been in renewing your Magic Key. Mm-hmm. But a lot of Magic Keys don't want to go down that road. They still want to renew. So yeah, you can renew and then wear whatever shirt you want. It's not going to have any impact. Absolutely not.
No. Yep. 1,000%. 1,000%. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, and look, here's the thing. It's like, I kind of sympathize a little bit with the Magic Keys in the sense of like, I understand that there's this fear of like, oh, well, we might not be able to renew in the future, right? Mm-hmm. So I need to jump on that renew train now, or because if I let it lapse, I might not be able to come back in. And I understand that. I completely understand and sympathize with that. But there also has to be a point where you put your foot down and say, I'm not happy. I don't like the reservations. I don't like Genie Plus. I don't like this, that, and the other. It's too expensive. I'm not going to buy into something that I'm not happy with. So I don't know.
And this is the thing that always kind of gripes me about Disney fans, and I'm one of them, but I'm just saying where it's just all about adjustment. You know, do what is better for your wallet, but yet you could still make a statement by saying, you know what, if I have to cut costs, Disney, this is why. Because prices just keep going up. I let go of both of my annual passes for Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Does that necessarily mean I'm not going completely altogether? No. That just means I have a different strategic plan that I have to go through in order to kind of balance out the finances based on the prices that Disney is currently going through right now.
Yeah, and we've seen that kind of, I think, contraction from a lot of different segments, right? As people kind of reevaluate their finances and what works for them. I think we'll see that trend continue. It's interesting because I believe it was Dave from Fresh Baked who had a recent video on the food situation at Disneyland Resort, for example, right? Where yes, prices are more and revenues or income is up, right, at the parks segment, but food sales are actually from what he has seen are down. And it's like, well, why is that, and I think it's some of that is driven by people just going, hey, you know what, maybe I don't need every single snack on Main Street kind of thing. Maybe I can do with maybe 2-3 snacks a day, going out maybe twice to the parks. Maybe I'll just reduce that down to one, and so forth. So I think you are seeing this kind of this kind of reining in of some spending at the various segments. I think that's parks related too. And I think also too, I think you're getting maybe a little bit of a brand withdrawal. And those kinds of things, if you can actually, pinpoint them on a spreadsheet or a quarterly earnings report, that's going to say a lot more than any shirt possibly ever could. So I think it's important to keep those things in mind.
No, 100%. And the people that are pulling back, I think, are the Magic Keys. And that kind of comes back to the unfavorable comment, because, like, here's the thing. If you're a Magic Key holder, you can come back tomorrow. You can come back next week. So there's no sense of urgency like, oh, I got to get the macaroon now. I'll be back next week anyway. Like, I can get it next time, right?
Yeah.
There's always like this next time kind of mentality with Magic Key holders. But if you're a day ticketer or you're a tourist, you don't have that same luxury. Like, if you're a tourist and you're staying at the resort for like 2 or 3 days, you're going to eat at the resort. Like, you don't have a choice. You either eat there or you starve, basically. Like, what I'm saying? As a key holder, you have a little more options. Like, well, I can leave in like an hour and I can go to the Carl Jr. down the street, or I can go to, whatever. So there's more options. I think the pullback is coming from those key holders saying, well, okay, yeah, it's expensive. I'll just eat after I leave. I'll drive through somewhere on the way home.
Well, a lot of that's on the key holders for sure, and especially in the Disneyland Resort area where, you don't necessarily have the bubble that you do at Walt Disney World, right? We talked about this before where, you have to drive out a considerable ways to eat off property at Walt Disney World. Whereas Disneyland, I mean, you could literally throw a stone from Tomorrowland and hit something on the outside. That's how close it actually is. So that kind of plays into that a little bit. But I mean, look, I don't necessarily want to blame key holders completely. I think part of the issues is efficiency and operation, right? I mean, we're seeing so much dedicated to mobile order, where it's maybe a little bit more complicated than it was to order food and so forth, and that whole thing, at least at Disneyland, from what I've seen, I don't know if that's been consistent at Walt Disney World, George, but that's what I've seen at Disneyland. And then the other thing too is the company has tried to pivot away from kind of these price increases, and because I think they kind of understand this dynamic where if you increase the price so much, people will kind of pull back. So they instead have been kind of pulling back on portion sizes, right? Which is kind of a cost increase in itself, and that's where Christine Waysigns McCarthy, that comment comes from, right? It's the withholding of portions in order to control the rising the rising inflation, that we've all been experiencing. Now, they were forced to up the price a little bit across their line, but it's just, you just don't have a choice at a certain point. But they kind of understand that relationship between price and people saying, you know what, instead of paying the higher price, I'll just forego that one thing in favor of something else, or in favor of nothing at all. So it's this delicate balancing act when it comes to pricing and so forth. I just thought it was very interesting that maybe food sales are down at this time. And again, those kinds of things happening where you're seeing a loss in revenue or a loss in I don't know, pass holders, like to a severe extent, those things are going to have much more of an impact than like I said, a shirt ever will.
Well, that's 100%. Even like the $6 billion chunk of change that Disney got their hands on that could possibly be used for future park projects and what have you. And a lot of people kind of misinterpret it to say, oh yeah, we're going to get more, things to do at the parks. Well, always keep in mind that when you get more in the parks and there's more stuff to do, Disney has to make that money back. So chances are, after they make these said projects with the money, prices are going to go up.
100%. And George, that was a beautiful segue into our next question, actually, because it does tie into our next question.
Sure.
From CSRS. And CSRS is asking, if Disney's making record dough more than pre-pandy levels, why are they still claiming the money is not enough to spend in the parks? Hopefully I'm wrong, and we will see a lot of new things announced at the D23 next month. Dre, I'll start with you this time. What are your thoughts on this particular question from our friend CSRS?
Well, it's a fascinating kind of thing here, and I've heard this a lot, where it's like you see these, fans see these quarterly earnings reports and they just go, "Oh my God, you're making all this money. How are you not spending that back into the parks?" And even I have contributed to that frustration as well. I would like to think more tactfully, but I do get caught up in this as well. I will make no bones about it. So it's like, well, okay, why is this necessarily happening? Well, let's think about it, folks. Let's really break it down. And I'm going to break it down really, really quickly. Okay. Disneyland was closed for 412 days, right? And that was millions of dollars per day that they had to incur because of that. And the international parks, they weren't necessarily closed for that extent, right? They were kind of off and on, but they have racked up their own, time off, let's say. And that's contributed to that debt as well. So just that alone, if there was nothing else attached to it, that would be something where you have to make that revenue back. And do you necessarily ever do that? Well, it's tough to say in terms of cash flow. But then let's go ahead and add in a little bit more to that equation. Guys may have remembered, but Disney made a huge purchase right before the events of 2020 in the form of 20th Century Fox. And $40 billion of that was incurred on the balance sheet itself. That's debt, right? And we all know, think about the interest rate on $40 billion. Now think about the interest rates actually increasing.
Crazy.
That's kind of the issues that you're dealing with. So you have this $40 billion debt that you just incurred before the events of 2020. Then you have a huge amount of closures that affected not just the parks themselves, but across company line. Remember, theaters, their previous linear and distribution platforms that they used to have, right, were not necessarily available in the same way that they always had been. So this was a profound shift for the entire company. Now, interesting. So, okay, people think like, the revenues for the last quarter 3, increased from 4.3 billion to 7.4 billion, right? Year over year. And people are like, oh, that's a huge number. Well, the income though was only, as far as profitability, it was only like around $2 billion. Right. Okay. That's how much money the parks actually brought in after all their expenses associated with running them. So it's not like you're getting the whole bit of pie there, but $2 billion sounds good, right? Well, that is until, you have maybe a Bob Chapek committing $30 billion worth of, worth of their cash, right, towards the studio division. So with the little amount of money that you have, you're taking $30 billion in that, and you're just putting it over in studio, which is fine. There are reasons to do that, right? But
a solid case, to be honest.
There's a solid case to do that, right? Because I believe Braden from Mickey Views broke this down really nicely on his live stream, which y'all should check out if he still has it up anyway. It's like you have a cost expense with the parks, right? An ongoing cost when it comes to labor and management operation and so forth that you don't necessarily have to incur in the same way for the studio division. You make a film and you can make money back on that film to the end of time. Just from that film existing, right? So I understand why those resources are being poured into the studio division. Ain't no question. But to give you that gives you an idea of the cash flow situation for the entire company. So I understand people, they get kind of like, oh man, you see these big numbers from the quarterly earnings reports, and it's like, wow, why can't we have that? Maybe some of that put into the parks. And I get you and I understand you. And I do think that there should be some of that, just a little bit of that going back into the parks, maybe a little bit more balance between the studio and the parks than there has been, the last year or so. I understand that, but that Disney's going to prioritize where they feel that money is going to be spent best. We did get $6 billion, looks like attached to the Parks and Resorts division, the Parks Experiences and Parks division, which is good, right? And I think that will improve a lot. And there are some questions I think we have relating directly to that, which we'll get into. But that's kind of why it's don't necessarily look at it as the big numbers. Look at it as cash flow. Look at it as we have to pay down this enormous debt, and if we miss out on those payments, we could be hitting bankruptcy immediately. So it's all of those things that I think people should be looking at, not just from one side of the equation, but from all of it.
And I think one thing that people have to also remember are the parks are a very mature business for Disney. Like they're established, they've been around for 60 plus years, or in Florida's case, 50 plus years. They're making money now, right?
Yeah.
The streaming thing is a fledgling business.
Yes.
So it's a new endeavor. It's studio connected for sure, but it's still a new entity that Disney's trying to gain market share in.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, like, even Roy Disney, the nephew of Walt, said the film business was and will always be the heartbeat of this company.
Yeah.
So I think that it's the right move for Disney overall to focus on that streaming business, because that's what fuels the entire company. Look, we live in an IP world. Without the studio, the parks have nothing to build, because Disney obviously refuses to build original attractions. So you need those IP to fuel the park stuff. So I can see why Chapek is going, okay, look, you know what? This is the future. Streaming is the future. Now we have to pump everything we can into this to get relevant, to make sure we can compete with like Netflix and Amazon and what have you. They got to pump that in. Now, to your point, Ray, 30 billion is an awful lot of money. Can they take a little bit of that and maybe throw it on the park side? Yeah, I think they should. And what we're hearing is, I guess, 6 billion is being kind of funneled into the park division. And I don't know that, I don't think that's been confirmed, but that's kind of the rumor. And if that's the case, that's very, very good news for us park fans.
I think they said like 6 billion capex. So,
Right.
and I think a lot of people have made the assumption that the majority of that might be actually parks related. So I hope that is actually the case. To put a little bit more clarity though, for our viewers, OG, yes, they have had kind of a market capture mentality in mind for DTC, but it's very clear recently that Bob Chapek, has been kind of switching tact a little bit, and is looking for a balance between market capture and profitability. Previously, it was just pure market capture. And listen, for as much money as the parks made, right, 2 billion or so, they lost $1 billion just in streaming. I think with kind of what has happened with Netflix and so forth, and what's been happening across the kind of DTC lineup between all these products, is that profitability is kind of king. And Chapek understands that. Chapek realizes that, which is why the oppressive pricing strategy and so forth. So I do think there's a balance, a little bit more of a balance there happening at that DTC level, which is overall good if you're a Parks fan, because you don't want necessarily that to be kind of, loss in income hanging over the company for very much longer. We definitely want all segments to be profitable, because in the end, that's the only way we really get major investment. And I'll agree with you, right? The parks are kind of a limited in their potential revenue growth without major investment. Right, so it's one of the reasons why they've kind of been looking at these other divisions within the company, but I do believe a rebalancing is due, and it sounds like the company is pivoting in that direction, which is good for all of us.
Yeah, 100%. George, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with both of you. Do I personally feel like, this is where I may differ, 30 billion towards the studio? I would say maybe not as much. I would kind of divvy that up a little bit and kind of spread that around a little bit, especially now just finding out like what's going on with AMC right now, and, getting those films into the theaters, and you have to solely rely just on streaming, where streaming, as you had mentioned, OG, it's like, it's the newbie for Disney. It's like not quite there yet. It hasn't established itself yet. But I also agree with your sense of where you say you need those IPs of the films to get them into the parks. But I do feel like that they should just kind of break up some of those funds and put them towards the parks. But there was also a time, especially growing up during like right after Animal Kingdom, during like the early 2000s into the mid 2000s, what have you, that really, if you look at the parks as a whole, not a whole lot was going on. You might get one attraction here, you might get one attraction there, but there was a time frame that the parks weren't getting anything new, and they just had to rely on what was already there, and people still went.
Paul Presser.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
but that's a great point, George. You said, and people still went. And we wonder why they don't invest heavily into these parks. People still go. They don't even put any money into them, and people still flock to them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until really that they started having the D23 expos, and when they had like the parks panels and everything, and Jay Rasulo was up on stage and gave this big presentation, and everyone got hyped up for the new Fantasyland, and then find out it was all Princess IP, and boy, did you see those crowds just boom, So it was, but in the sense, everyone kind of expected that from Disney. It was like, every couple years, we're going to get a new land. We're going to get several new attractions. We may even get a new park. But in all reality, Disney really doesn't have to do that every couple years. They have the fan base. They have the tools. They have the reliability to know that they can get people through those turnstiles.
And that's why the streaming war is much more fragile for them. And that's why you're seeing more money going into that, because it's very easy for them to lose a lot of ground, with Netflix or HBO Max or Amazon. The park business is very solid.
Yeah.
It is.
And I honestly really think with, I'm sorry, Dre.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just, my last thing I was going to say is, as far as with the $71 billion investment into Fox, I mean, for me personally, as we had talked about this several times on the show, that I think that they don't need everything that Fox holds. Break that up and sell off those to different companies. I personally don't need Home Alone on Disney Plus. I don't need Mrs. Doubtfire on Disney Plus. I love those movies, but I don't need them to be on the Disney platform.
There are definitely tangible assets that they could have just spun off, right? I think that goes without saying right there.
100%.
And I think they did do a little bit of that, but not necessarily to the extent. I mean, it's $71 billion, folks. That's a lot to overcome.
Ridiculous.
And again, with that little amount of cash flow that they had, they spent $30 billion on the studio side, which I get it. I understand. I don't necessarily. I'm not really the biggest proponent for how they're necessarily going about it, especially, I don't know. I this whole thing of like, we're going to send, theatrical films straight to streaming, and not even have kind of an 18-month window where you could necessarily sell it to a third party first. From what I understand, Peacock, that's what they're doing, right? There's an 18-month window there before they actually get products into that streaming platform. Where they've sold it upwards twice, maybe even more, before it actually hits that, right? When it comes to premium video on demand. Maybe the rentals, even though that's not necessarily a big thing anymore. Physical media. Direct distribution downloads and Amazon Prime Video and Netflix. Before it even hits Peacock, it's hit all these different places that they can kind of sell it out. This idea that we're just going to funnel all of that content right into Disney Plus. I understand the aggression in that strategy right there, but I don't know. I mean, they had to increase prices. That's
but even with that $30 billion investment for the studios, that still kind of worries me, whether it's in theaters or streaming, because I saw the preview for the upcoming animated feature film Strange World, and I tell you what,
I mean,
and the other part with Fox is the one plus side that they can get from Fox is Avatar. Because they're not just going to have one sequel, but they're having 3 more sequels after that. So hopefully, if that kind of sticks, hopefully, I mean, it's still,
$70 billion though, George.
Oh, no, Avatar, if you do have 4 not for that amount. No, not for that amount. I mean, like as far as keeping that specifically from Fox. That was the
And-
one thing that they could have benefit, but everything out, no, not $70 billion. Absolutely
crazy.
not.
I guess the $30 billion number too. I think Christine Way Sons McCarthy was asked this maybe like 3 or 4 quarterly earnings reports ago, and she said that that's not even necessarily towards just content alone. Some of that is just shoring up the ability for them to generate content in the future and distribute it effectively. So it's a lot of back end infrastructure. So it's like.
Right.
Just a lot of dough.
That's my worry, because if you're going to invest $30 billion into a studio and you're going to bring out product that may not necessarily get people's attention, Lightyear, underwhelmed. I'm sorry, right out the back, I'm telling you right now, just from that preview, Strange World is not going to do well. I will eat those words. I will eat crow if I am wrong. But I tell you what, that preview literally wanted me to get up off that theater, go out and go grab a drink. Like literally.
No, you're
detox.
Not, detox. You're not wrong, George, and you will not have to eat crow. That movie, I don't think it'll do well. Maybe I'll have to eat crow with you, but I don't think it'll do well. I really don't.
Well, let's think about this for a second, guys. I mean, look at the Marvel films. Now, I get it. They're high. They've earned a lot of money at the box office. Not saying that they haven't, but Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness just barely peaked over $1 billion after the monumental success that was Spider-Man: No Way Home, right? And then you have Thor: Love and Thunder come out, and it's about where we're gonna be at. I think OG. I think I remember telling you in one of our DMs there that it feels like to me like an $800 million film or so. Just from the feedback I was getting, I think Valiant Renegade made a similar proposal, right? And it looks like it's gonna be $750 million or so at the end of its theatrical run. So it's not necessarily going to get over $1 billion, even though it was budgeted for it. Star Wars was the last time we heard of a film even reaching pre-production since 2018. Anybody? And not many. It's. I mean, we hear talks of maybe what is it? Some other films coming out, maybe Taika Waititi or whatever, but nothing concrete. That's for sure. And yet we have not seen anything on that front, and that's just with 2 of their biggest studios. Multiply that out, right. Pixar, not good.
No, and that's where my worry is, because you're not only just going to invest the $30 billion into the studios, but then, as OG had put, that you need those IPs for the popularity and the success to put them in the parks. Well, what if every film that they put out is unsuccessful?
Yep.
Yeah, well,
huge risk.
Yeah, I think these movies are definitely underperforming to pre-Pandy levels. Are other studios, though, in terms of hitting $1 billion, are other studios doing that? Though? I mean, aside from Top Gun. Top Gun's a fucking insane. But I mean, I don't know.
I get that argument, right? But you knew because I believe Thor: Love and Thunder was in production. I think it was like when this stuff was kicking off here in 2021 or so. You knew the theater industry was going to be necessarily impacted, but you still spent upwards of $200 million, $250 million. Some people even say $300 million on these films, expecting them to be do gangbusters business, and that necessarily wasn't going to be the case. And that's if everything was firing 100%, right? Where the creativity, right, I think, was at its peak. But Marvel was in kind of this place where it kind of needed to rebound from the high of Endgame right there, and yet you still invested that much money. And again, like George says, if you don't necessarily really appeal to audiences in the same way, you spending that amount of money towards these products that don't necessarily resonate, that could be really bad. Whereas the Parks division, that's just quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter, right? So it's like, I get it. It's more of a long range plan with the studio side of the business, right? And we've seen JPEG maybe inch towards profitability over just market capture, which I think is probably for the best, right? But you still have this division, I would say, like the Parks division, that desperately needs that cash. I mean, look at Small World right now. Look at Pirates of the Caribbean. They're not in the best shape right now. I understand there are other market forces at play that might be impacting those attractions, but it's clear that you need investment of some kind. and yet the balance is a little bit out of whack. And I do agree with George here. It's like you need to diversify. You don't necessarily need to have $30 billion going towards one division and not much to the other. So it's one of those things. Hopefully we answer that question, CS.
And our good friend Matthew Murr comes in asking, do you think the addition of Walt into Enchantment, the new fireworks show, by the way, at Walt Disney World, might show Disney is starting to care more about him? Or do you think it might be just optics to save face? Matthew, this is an interesting question. I think Disney, and I'll probably get a lot of heat for this, I think they were sort of beta testing removing Walt, kind of putting out those trial balloons a little bit. They did it with Disneyland, the anniversary last month, July 17th, by excluding his opening day speech. Then there was rumors all over Twitter and social media that they were going to remove the Walt of Walt Disney World. And neither thing went over very well with fans. Mm-hmm. For the most part, fans kind of rejected the notion of removing Walt from these parks. So I think that there is a little bit of saving face here. I think that they did hear us on social media and are go, okay, this isn't like super popular. On top of that, when it comes to Walt Disney World, there were a lot of surveys being released about the 50th. And one of the main problems with that celebration is that there wasn't enough nostalgia and things like that. And Walt is definitely tied into all that nostalgia. So I can definitely see that also playing a factor in them adding Walt Disney to this fireworks show. So I think it's a range of things. It's not just a one thing. It's multiple things. They're looking at the data, as Chapek says, and they're seeing that people want this stuff in these shows. They want that emotional connection, that historic connection. But I also do think that they saw the outrage on social media in regards to when they were rumored to remove Walt and saw how bad that went, and they're looking at that as well. So there's a bunch of different factors. But George, you're our Walt Disney World guy. What do you think?
I actually feel like, and I'm probably going to get heat for this as well, I think it's a little bit of both, really. I think, honestly, the way that the company is being run now, is especially when it's like corporate, like fully corporate, they will do anything that they feel is best just for the company, but yet not even realize how that company came to be by dishonoring the person who was the founder. And they would be willing to do that if they feel that it would move the company forward in today's time era for the guests, for the fans, what have you. But I also feel that because of the uproar online and how fans really took to that notion of, don't you dare remove Walt from Walt Disney World I think, they could also see it that way again, because it hits the quota of what they're trying to accomplish as a company. If they lose their audience, if they lose the appeal of what people are wanting, then they're losing money. So I necessarily don't feel like, again, I hate saying this, that the company itself of Disney really cares about Walt. It's just what is going to work for them at the end of the day because of what we're saying in the Disney community on social media. That's what's going to make them make that decision to either keep him or not. As far as the Enchantment fireworks go, I've seen it. It needs it. It needs Walt. It's not a bad show. It's just, if you're going to have something to promote the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World, the last dream of his, honor the man. Have him incorporated, especially in the Magic Kingdom.
100%. Well said, brother. Well said. Dre, what are your thoughts on Matthew Murr's question?
Well, I'll just have to go ahead and play it here for you.
And the hard facts.
Some hard facts.
I am getting a little bit of an echo.
Yes.
Are you getting a little echo?
I was getting a little echo as well. Are we good now? I think we're good.
I think we're good now.
Okay.
I think we're good. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead again one more time.
Well, no, I was just going to say.
And the hard facts.
Those are hard facts right there. To be completely fair, right? I think it's a question. It's two things. One is obviously the events of 2020 had a severe impact on the 50th and what they were going to do for the 50th. That's without question. Now, could they have done more? Absolutely. There's no question they could have done more. But at the time when those plans were being revised, Disneyland wasn't even open. So it's like, how do we necessarily go forward with this while we're experiencing huge losses in revenue from this same division. It's kind of difficult to make that move, and I get it. But the other thing too is, I think a question for the company is really relevance when it comes to Walt. I mean, I remember back in 2011 sitting at the panel going over Buena Vista Street and how the Imagineers, I guess there was some internal polling to suggest that people didn't even know who Walt was, nor did they even realize that he was a real person, right? We know that sentiment exists out there amongst the general audience, and that was more than 10 years ago now. So I think they were looking at this and going, well, do we necessarily rely on nostalgia? Or because, we're having so many new people come in and experience this thing, do we set those things aside in favor of other things, right? And, roughly speaking, when it comes to 50th and 50th celebration and so forth. I can get why they went in that direction, but not realizing the product that I think they had at the time they had it. This was a 50th celebration of everything that Walt Disney World was. And many people were going to be coming there for the nostalgia feels. That was going to be your main, people who were going to be attending that. And even if it wasn't a huge demographic or a huge percentage of the people that were going to be attending, those people who were going to get that kind of nostalgia feel out of it and feel satisfied with what they saw were going to be your biggest proponents for the 50th, right?
100%.
So they were probably going to be like, hey, you got to go to Walt Disney World. You got to see the 50th stuff. This is really cool. Then they were going to evangelize to their friends and family and so forth. When they didn't necessarily satisfy that clientele, that had problems down the line, I think. And I think a lot of that's coming home. Unfortunately, with how the 50th was kind of reviewed and seen and so forth. So I do think putting Walt back in there is kind of a make good. It's kind of realizing like, oh, we probably should have put more emphasis on this. Not to say that they wouldn't have, but at the time they should have.
100%. And now one last question before I have to take off. This will be the last question of this particular video. We got a lot of great questions from the Q&A, though. We're more than likely going to do a part 2 because there were just so many great questions. But one more to kind of finish it off and we'll kind of wrap it up. Michael Lee's asking, what's going on with the Eastern Gateway? Is that project dead? Does Disney still want to expand DCA into the bus area? I'll start off on this one, Michael. I think that, does Disney still want to? Yes, absolutely. Disney's always looking for ways to sort of expand and kind of maximize its potential, so to speak, right? I think there's definitely an interest there. Is the project dead? It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think anything is really dead at Disney. I think these things can always be resurrected later on. I think that right now it's sort of a iffy situation because of Harry Sadu and his situation with the FBI. It's kind of a big deal, Mm-hmm. But I do feel that situation is kind of waning quite a bit, to be very honest. I haven't heard many things about that lately, and it feels like it doesn't look like Disney is going to be implicated in any way. It's been several months now. I think you would have heard something by now if they were. Agreed. And Anaheim City Council, they're not really doing anything to kind of like you would think that like they would sort of make these like optic moves, right? They turned down campaign finance recently and things like that. They turned down the entertainment tax. It doesn't even seem like the city council is really that concerned about this probe on an optics level, at least. So I don't really know, Michael, to be honest with you. I really don't know if it's dead or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some form of it in the next few years. I think that there definitely is an interest with Disney to expand into that bus area. Absolutely. So we'll see. Right now, I don't think we're going to hear anything at D23. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I think eventually it'll happen. What do you think, Dre?
Oh, I'll go out on a little bit more of a limb than that. I will say it will absolutely happen as long as they own the land. They still own the land that the Eastern Gateway project was going to sit on, the major parking structure and I believe it was the Carousel Inn that they demoed. Yep. Yeah, and it's still raised and all that kind of stuff. as long as they still own those properties, which they have to pay taxes on every single year on, and there's a number of fees and so forth that they just have to pay just on the land itself. So it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily like an asset, right? That's just that's not necessarily counting against you. It is up until the point that they actually develop on it. As long as they still own that, it is absolutely going to happen, no question in my mind.
Wow.
That just brings the concern being if they ever sell that, there goes that product that project,
yeah.
right? So if you hear a report out there saying that they sold that, Eastern Gateway is dead completely. But I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think they are. I think they're looking at it from the short range and the long range. Short range, it's like we can't necessarily develop anything on it now, but we still want to have that option available. Because I think if you get rid of it, then your only way to expand parking, which, by the way, they're at a deficit at right now, is the Toy Story lot. And is that necessarily the best use of that space? I don't think it is. So I think they do want that kind of real estate just for the expansion of the entire resort, not just DCA. I think that's really, really foundational to their long range plans. And like I said, unless that situation changes, it is absolutely going to happen, no question. I never believe that Eastern Gateway was completely dead ever, because it's like they own that land for a reason, guys, and that's really the only place of expansion, at least when it comes to parking and for DCA, that really makes sense.
Well said, Mr. Family Man. What do you think? Eastern Gateway, dead, not dead? Does Disney still want to do it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually agree with Dre on that one. I really, truly feel like the Eastern Gateway was never really flushed on the toilet, so to speak, once, that fourth hotel, fell through and everything. And Disney is still going to try to find a way to implement that, because it has to move like a domino effect. It's not just because of DCA to get an expansion. This Eastern Gateway is, as Dre said, it has to be implemented to be able to expand the whole entire resort as a whole. And I feel like right now it's just in limbo. I really just feel like they're just holding it and just waiting for the right time, when that lightning in a bottle, ready to strike. And when they have that opportunity, I think they're going to go for it. And then that's when I think we'll start to hear the news little by little. Oh, DCA is probably going to get a major expansion and everything, but the Eastern Gateway has to come first more than anything.
100%. And if the city and all the politics get in the way, you guys are not doing it. You have to let Disney expand and do what they got to do, because Disneyland Resort is the heartbeat of Anaheim. Regardless of what the residents wants to say, or whatever the local business is. I mean, the resort is what feeds the entire area, and it needs to continue to grow and be able to be a draw, for tourism and even locals and what have you. So I really do hope that Anaheim works with Disney on that and gets that done, because it needs to be done.
Don't worry, OG. I think it's okay to be a little bit more optimistic.
Life finds a way.
Sometimes it happens. So let's hold out.
It really does. It really, really does. So a fantastic Q&A. I got a lot of questions this time that were phenomenal, and I want to do like a part 2. So maybe later on during the week, the fellows will join me again and we'll do like a part 2 on this, because there are a lot more questions that we got that were really, really phenomenal that I really do want to address. But we tackled a few of them today, and I want to thank Dre and George for coming on today. I love you guys, man. And I'll go ahead and sign out. Mr. Family Man, you go first, and then I'll go down to Dre.
Absolutely. Well, as OG had mentioned, I am George, the Disney Family Man 23.
Who recently just hit 100 subscribers, by the way, on his YouTube channel.
Absolutely. So if you would like to make it 101, you can subscribe to me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, you can find me here on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but yet sticky Disney news and info.
There we go.
There you go. For the 100, right there. Gotta have it, for sure.
And also, Real quick, I do want to also give a shout out to our buddy Theme Park Casual, who also hit 100 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Casual is a friend of the channel. He is family to us. Give him a subscribe as well. This guy does a lot of phenomenal content. He focuses a lot on Knott's Berry Farm. He had a great live stream yesterday, actually, kind of showcasing Ghost Town and what have you. And I haven't been to Knott's in a long time. I gotta say, guys, some of the stuff there looks pretty cool, like the blacksmith and all that. I was pretty impressed.
Right?
He kind of sold me a little bit on that park. He kind of did. So definitely check out Casual. He's phenomenal. We love Casual, and he does great work. He just started on YouTube. He's already at 100, so he's doing pretty good. And give him a subscribe and all the love. And this guy as well, George. You know George's family. Come on. So of course, give George the love. We love George.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, round of applause for all of you. How about that?
Exactly. And then we got down below, we got the Dr. Dre Vash guy, host of Freshly Squeezed. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, I appreciate all the love, guys. At Vash Sky, right down there. That's where you can go ahead and find me. Type it into Twitter, should pop up. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Go 55 at Freshly Squeezed. Your source for juice, news, and info. Squeeze fresh right from the Grove. And I guess because this one wanted to come out, we'll play it.
But really, nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
It wanted to come out so bad. All right. Fine. Sorry.
There we go.
By the way.
There we go. And then we got to top it off with the
Orchard fresh and delicious.
There you go. I love it.
There we go. So we will definitely be doing some sort of part 2 on this because there are a lot of great questions that you guys sent in that we couldn't get to today. But everyone that submitted questions in this Q&A, thank you so much. It was a really good time. I mean, there was a lot of great questions that meaty questions, right, guys? Like questions that took kind of a lot of explaining and you know, and I love those kind. If you're ever going to submit a question to OG55,
Go balls to the wall.
go balls to the wall and get stuff that really gets our imagination kind of going, as opposed to like, what's your favorite attraction at DCA? If you guys give me what's your favorite attraction at Disneyland, what's your favorite attraction at DCA, probably won't make it on the show. But if you really get our kind of creative juices flowing, very good chance that that your question will be featured, because those are the kind of questions, chef's kiss, that we love.
Those are the ones that keep me up at night for sure.
Exactly. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and as always, have a wonderful day.